Perfect. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning. My name is Cam Jones. I have the privilege of serving as the chair for the Chamber Public Affairs Committee. We are the group that's in charge of putting on today's forum. We'd like to welcome all of our candidates and thank you for attending today. I have a couple of remarks that I would like to read off here. This candidate forum is organized by the Brookings Area Chamber of Commerce Public Affairs Committee. We would like to thank our partner agency, Brookings Economic Development Corporation, for their support and collaboration year-round. We'd also like to thank the City of Brookings for their help in getting the space set up, and Cool Beans, who is our forum coffee sponsor. Today we have our District 7 House of Representative candidates present to introduce themselves and answer your questions. Our candidates include, and please raise your hand, Melissa Herman, Roger DeGroot, and Cole Sartell. This forum is being broadcasted on Mediacom, Channel 9, Swift Telecommunications, and ITC channels, and will be replayed again tonight, Saturday, at 9 p.m., Sunday at 2 p.m., and Monday at 6 p.m. Our process for the forum will be, each candidate will get 2 minutes for opening remarks. A few questions have been provided by our committee. If there are additional questions, paper or pens are located in the back. Please raise your question and they will be picked up by our volunteers. No candidate has received questions in advance. Our timer is located in the front. Each candidate will have 60 seconds to answer the question. When there's 10 seconds left in your time, the timer will hold up a sign. We ask that you wrap up your question quickly. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes for final remarks. Again, thank you to our candidates and thank you for your commitment to our community and our state. With that, we will get started with opening remarks and we'll just work down the line here. Cole, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. And thank you for putting this on, and thank you for Cool Beans for the coffee. My name is Cole Sartell, and I'm running for District 7 House as a Democrat. I have lived here since 2007, moved here with my parents, went through the Brookings High School system, and spent some time at SDSU. I'm running to bring diversity and Brookings values to the state level. Brookings is a very, very model community for any town in this nation. And I'd like to bring a lot of the policies that we have there in regards to diversion programs and the municipality score that we have with the Human Rights Campaign. One of the biggest reasons and one of the most important things to me personally as a gay man in this community is the municipality score of 100 that we have and the policies that we've been able to put into place to get it that way, to make Brookings the most inclusive city in the state. So, and I know there's a lot of other communities that could benefit from that as well. And I'd like to be some semblance of voice of reason to the rhetoric that is being spoken from our capital to stand up for not only people like me, but for those other diverse groups of people in this community and the education system and the diversion programs through the judicial system. So I really, plainly put, political party doesn't matter much to me. I don't care what party you're from. As long as we believe that we have the same freedoms and responsibilities as each other, that's a great place to start. And then everything else can be worked out from there. So I've been involved in many different aspects of things, and I hope to be able to go over that more with you here. Thank you.
Roger?
I'm Roger DeGroot, and I'm running for the House seat in District 7, and I would like to take this opportunity, first of all, to thank the Chamber and the Public Affairs Committee for putting this on. Most of you know me, but I'll give you a little bit of my personal history. I've been married for 51 years. My wife is here with me. She's been my rock during all this time, and sometimes I'm sure it hasn't been real easy. I have 3 children. We have 3 children. And I forget to say all the time, we have 9 grandchildren. I have a daughter that lives in T that has 1 child. I have a daughter that lives in Worthing, South Dakota that has 4 children. And we have a son that lives in Chicago and he has 4, so you can see we've done our part. Right now, I'm looking to start a new chapter in my life. I mean, I'm a retired superintendent. My background is in education, and if you've heard me speak before, oops, my chair just went down. My background's in education. I've had 40 years as a teacher, as a principal, and as a superintendent. And when I was the elementary principal, I became the president of the state organization when I was a superintendent. I became the president of the Superintendents Association in the state of South Dakota. So I've always had a hankering to, to become part of that political system. When I had those positions, I would go out to pier and testify and sit in the gallery and look down and watch the folks do their job. Diane and I moved to Brookings 15 years ago, and I took the superintendent's job. And we've been extremely fortunate and blessed since we've moved here. The community has been extremely supportive of me as a superintendent, and now as I move forward in my next venture in life. I have 10 seconds left, so I'm going to wrap it up really quick. We hope to run a real tough campaign, and we will not have a national agenda. We will work for the people in District 7.
Thank you, Roger. Melissa?
Good morning. Thank you for coming. Thank you to the Chamber for putting on this event for us today and for allowing us to use this venue. It is a joy to be here. My name is Melissa Heerman. I am running for District 7 House. I've been married to my husband, Cody, for 19 years, and 15 of those years have been here in Brookings with our 3 children that go to the Brookings School District. After just shy of 17 years working at Daktronics in various leadership positions, I accepted a role at Brookings Health System as the director of their revenue cycle. And at Brookings Health System, I also performed the role of their HIPAA privacy officer. I oversee groups such as billing, medical records, and patient access. I'm often asked why I'm running. Bottom line, I genuinely care about people. I demonstrate that by pouring my time and efforts into our communities. Serving others is woven into the fabric of who I am and how I live my life. I have invested 14 years in different leadership roles in manufacturing and healthcare. However, my journey in public service started much earlier. I, at a very early age, knew I wanted to serve, and I started raising my hand for these service opportunities. I worked for a senator as a legislative aide in college, and a few years after that, I became a member of the city council for Lake Preston. Shortly after that, I also assumed the role of mayor for a short time in my late 20s. Most recently, I've sat on the Brookings School Board. And during the 6 years where I was able to sit on the board, 4 of those years were in a leadership capacity. I have been investing time during this campaign to listening to members of the community. Sometimes I think as a people, we don't understand the importance of really listening and really hearing others and seeking to understand. This is important to me. And I think any representative needs to be able to listen in a powerful and intentional way. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Okay, our first question submitted. If elected, what committees do you see yourself serving on? And this question will start with you, Roger.
As you can see from my bio, I've been in education for over 40 years, and I've made that a priority throughout my career. And the number one committee that I will want to be on is the Education Committee, and I've even visited with some folks that might be in leadership out there that if I am elected, that's the committee that I would want to serve on, number one.
Thank you, Roger. And again, we'll just work down the line. Melissa?
Thank you. Roger and I are going to have to arm wrestle for education later. But I think he's got me beat as far as his 40 years in education. So originally, that was my goal as well, Education Committee and Health and Human Services. And I feel like in those 2 committees, I would be able to add value more quickly based on my experience. However, I now am looking for perhaps instead of education, maybe throwing my hat in the ring for commerce or local government. We've also had some discussions around what appropriations might look like I have an extensive budgeting and business background.
Thank you, Melissa. Cole?
Thank you. So I would be interested in taking part in the Education Committee and in Health and Human Services in 2 parts. The Human Services and Health in regards to how we can figure out the rollout of Medicaid expansion, because I do believe that will happen, and how we can get things like that budgeted out. And education in regards to how we can focus more on input from our state educators instead of out of state educators so we can build a stronger education system here.
Okay. Next question. If recreational marijuana passes a vote of the people, do you see any adjustments that will need to be made for the good of the cause? And Melissa, we'll start with you.
Yes, thank you. So I do think that there will have to be some changes, specifically around how the regulation will be enforced. Law enforcement will need some additional guidance as far as enforcing the law that will be in place. For example, with blood alcohol content, the regulation is able to be enforced with a .08 blood alcohol content. With marijuana, it will likely be something different, like 5 nanograms or something along those lines. But all of those details will have to be worked out should this pass here in November.
Cole?
Right, thank you. I do believe that we should even begin working on that if for some reason it doesn't pass in the election. We should be following the will of the voters as they intentionally voted on this subject because a lot of people have been disheartened with that process of our vote and our will being overturned. When that does pass and when we can get those laws into place, there are a lot of communities we can reach out to and model what they do. I do know the city of Brookings has agents from Colorado and other agencies that specialize there. And I do believe we would have a lot to learn from the reservations in the state, specifically Flandreau. They have a really good operation going on there and how they cultivate things safely and how they approve medical licenses. So there's, of course, still much we need to learn because it hasn't been implemented yet, but we have special expertise at our fingertips.
Roger?
If initiated Measure 27 does pass, the state legislators will have their hands full. There'll be a lot of things that will have to be done to regulate it. And as Cole said, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to look at other states that have brought it in, so we don't have to do it from scratch. We need to look at like the blood alcohol content. We need to look at the strength of the marijuana. We need to look at the purity. And I believe the bill says 3 to 6 plants. Will that change? So yeah, we will have to do a lot of work when we get to peer if this bill passes.
Next question, and I know this topic's been addressed a couple times already. What are your plans to address education in South Dakota, both K through 12 and higher ed? And Cole, we'll start with you.
Thank you. I know a big topic right now is the social studies standards. And a lot of educators are feeling like they don't have their voices heard. So the first step to anything at this point would be to invite our educators from in-state, from all over the state, to the table to discuss what changes may need to be made and to make sure that their voices are heard. I know a lot is mentioned in regards to how broad the standards we currently have up for debate are. And I do know many teachers, I've spoken to many teachers, Teacher of the Year. There are many who are afraid to speak out about how they feel about these standards and how certain things need to be taken care of. And we need to make sure we're not cultivating a culture of fear and intimidation when it comes to that. So really just listening to our educators themselves and those who are specialized in that over people from out of state.
I hope there's another question on the standards later on, because that's a whole other topic in itself, and it would certainly require more than a minute for me to speak on. What I would concentrate on, I think, most of all, if I'm out there and if I'm on that educational committee, is a couple things. Right now, throughout the United States, it's increasingly difficult to get quality teachers in the classroom. Even here in South Dakota, we have a difficult time, especially areas, getting teachers. It goes so far down in Florida, they're allowing military folks to come in and be teachers. So I would hope that we could at least look at education and a 5 to 6% increase again. But sometimes it's not all about the money. Sometimes it's about the way teachers are treated. We need to elevate the teachers and what they do every day in the classroom. We need to support them. and we need to reinforce them.
Melissa?
Yeah, the question is a little broad with education, and so there are so many things that would fit into that, from the teacher shortages to the social studies standards. Juvenile justice has an impact there, as well as the youth mental health. So there's a lot of my focus in education for youth, because over the last 6 years, I've really seen increases in certain behaviors and certain occurrences in the school district that are alarming. And I think a lot of us were able to see some of the survey results. A lot of us were able to see some of the survey results along those lines as well, regarding our youth mental health and what schools can do to help impact that in the family. So it's a broad topic, but I have a number of issues that are of interest to me within it.
Okay, we will ask somewhat of a follow-up question to that in a second here, but just as a reminder to folks in the crowd, if you'd like to submit a question, there are some slips in the back there by the coffee with pens and papers. We have a couple volunteers that are coming around collecting those questions there, so if you have a question, don't be afraid to submit those as well. As I mentioned, kind of a follow-up question to that last one there. Do you support increasing teacher pay? And I believe, Cole, we started with you last time, so Roger, we'll start with you this time.
I certainly support increasing teacher pay. The governor did a really nice job last year with the big increase that she gave us. And Melissa was on the board, and I'm sure she appreciated that very much, and the teachers did as well. But whenever we give a 6% raise, our neighboring states do the same thing. So we need to find an avenue that it's ongoing and that the teacher pay gets increased so we can catch up with some of these other states and recruit the best, brightest, and keep them in the state once they're educated.
Melissa?
Yeah, this is a topic we've worked really hard on as a school board over the last few years. We have seen some of the results come back about our standings for average teacher pay in South Dakota, and we put a lot of effort around increasing that for Brookings. And this issue is only coupled by the workforce shortages that are out there. Over the last year, we have been able to make some significant impact into teacher salary within the Brookings School District. And I think those were difficult to come to, a lot of effort and work on the school board to get there, but we have been able to pass along more than we received from the state in order to increase teacher pay and our standing within South Dakota. That being said, we're still not where we need to be to recruit, to retain, and to be able to make sure that we continue to have quality education in South Dakota.
I think it has a little more to do than just competing with our surrounding areas, because we're 50th in the nation again. We have to compete with the rest of the nation and how we're paying our teachers in this state. And that we can figure that out in multiple ways. One of those is looking at what we have in regards to the surplus in the general budget. And as far as anything else that we may be having from there, leftover COVID funds. But we do have a lot of work to do. It's really, really disheartening to see that we keep dropping down to 50th in the nation again. And I might not have all the answers right now, but I'm willing to work with any legislator from any side of the aisle to get this problem fixed so we can incite teachers to stay here and not leave.
Okay, maybe a tough question to answer in your 60 seconds here, but we'll ask it. What do you think of the current social studies standard being brought up right now? And Melissa, we'll start with you.
I of course have my own opinion. Ideal state for our students is they have the opportunity to build their knowledge and perspective by learning where we've come from, where we are now, and the ability to dream of where we want to be in the future, and as a culture and as a state. This learning should include accurate and age-appropriate, developmentally appropriate understanding of the mistakes we've made, the trials and the struggles, and everything that got us to where we are today, along with the achievements and the advancements. Some of the concerns I've heard when I've been having these discussions around the community from the school district perspective is the representation on the board that's deciding. And then also within the proposed curriculum, is it age appropriate? Is it developmentally appropriate for the different ages? So that's what I am hearing as I've been having discussions so far.
Cole?
Yeah, so I don't know how many of you had seen the public submission on those comments. 86% of public comment opposed those new standards. And it's a mix between the topics being too broad and not going into extreme depth to tie instances together in history. But it is also how those studies were created and who created them and why are we outsourcing all of this knowledge from other states and schools that may have accreditation issues. So I really think that if we do need to change these standards, if it's something that needs to be done, we need to scrap what we have now and start fresh and involve more educators from the state and get their input. I've had teachers tell me they're too afraid to speak out about this because they don't want to lose their job. So there is a problem, clearly, and I'd like to be a voice for those educators in making change to those.
I agree with everything Cole said and what Melissa said. I have a lot of friends that are still in the educational field, and I can't find one of them that support standards as it's presently written. I'm going to take this from a different angle. I'm doing it as quickly as I can. 8 years ago, the state brought in an evaluation system that they trained all the administrators and all the teachers, and they were required to use it. Otherwise, the school district would be in some trouble. That evaluation system uses the higher level thinking skills. The higher level, the teacher must teach at that higher level where you transfer learning, use abstract things. These standards don't do that. These standards are pretty much check the box kinds of things. So I see a quandary here where you have one state law says you have to evaluate a teacher at this level, and then on the other side of it you have the standards that say you have to do this, you have to check the boxes. So I think that needs to be brought up at a higher level, and that needs to be debated.
All right, shifting topics a little bit away from education here. Our next question: what are your views on LGBTQ rights? Cole, we will start with you.
I believe that every LGBTQ citizen in the state has the right to feel like they belong, and that our government really has some work to do with their public relations, because a lot of the rhetoric that's coming from the Capitol is very, very harmful. And our governor wants to know where the high depression and suicide rates in the community are in the state are so high. We need to take a look at ourselves and how we're speaking about people who are listening and the kids who are listening to us. I want to bring every policy that I can that Brookings has done in regards to the MEI scores, in housing protections and employment, and other aspects, and bring those all to the state level, because there's more people than just those that live in this town that need our help. And it's just really disheartening to see the things that are said about kids that just want to live their life and their families. And we should really help people indulge in their personal freedoms and responsibilities just like everybody else.
Could you repeat the question?
Yes. What are your views on LGBTQ rights?
Right. Well, Cole talked about, sounded like from the state level, it's negative coming this way. I believe that everybody has a right to have their rights heard. I think Brookings has done an exceptional job. As you know, we're a diversity town of 100% ranking, the best one in the state. I believe even with that ranking, I sat on the diversity board for some time, and I've learned so much when I sat on that board. Even as good as we are now, there's always work to be done, and we need to respect everybody, and no matter what their gender, what their feelings and their thoughts are. And I even go to as far as just even at the state level in the legislature, we need to treat each other with respect at all levels. I mean, whatever happened to the golden rule and respecting people, their views? You can disagree with them, but still love them at the end.
Melissa?
So as far as rights go, I would fall back to some of our founding documents like the Declaration of Independence, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. and they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I believe that compassion, care, and respect should be extended to all, and that's how I live my life and how I would represent the issue in Pierre.
Okay. Next question here. Do you support or oppose the Supreme Court Dobbs decision, which repealed abortion rights in South Dakota? And would you support or oppose the effort to codify Roe in South Dakota? Roger, looks like we're starting with you this time.
This is a topic has been debated for hundreds of years, or at least 100 years. In 1972, the Supreme Court allowed abortion to happen in all the states. Now, this year, the Supreme Court reverses that and puts the rights of to determine whether abortions are legal or not with the state. And in many of those states, they had trigger laws. And South Dakota is one of those states that had a trigger law. And the way I understand that trigger law, it's very restrictive. It restricts an abortion only to saving the life of the mother. And I'm against that. I believe that law, and I believe there are bills already being drafted to change that trigger law. I believe that it should be expanded to rape and incest. And if there is a baby that's not viable, that doesn't have a skull, that baby should be able to abort it. And if there's two children in the womb and one has to be taken to save the other one, I believe that has to be aborted.
Melissa?
Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry. One more time.
Do you support or oppose the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision, which repealed abortion rights in South Dakota? And would you support or oppose the effort to codify Roe in South Dakota?
So I have a strong regard for the sanctity of human life, and this topic is extremely complicated, specifically for 60 seconds. There's just a number of different scenarios that are involved. But as I approach this topic, it is with a posture of deep respect and care overall. So I think care and dignity should be provided to mothers of all backgrounds and in any situation. For me, part of thoughtful leadership is looking at an issue from multiple angles, and in this case, there certainly are multiple angles. And I think a key to this legislation is going to come down to definitions. So Roger brought up a couple of different scenarios. So things that have been thrown out are ectopic, stillbirth, non-viable. Some people have a different definition of what non-viable pregnancy means, and that will have to be defined. So I think there will be a lot of bills. I think there'll be a lot of discussion. There are some bills already being proposed that I would certainly not be in support of. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Cole?
Well, they're right. It is a very complicated issue, which is why we don't deserve the right to make that decision for an individual who can get pregnant. The right to that health care, that decision should be between the individual and their doctor. We didn't go to medical school. And the way it is right now, doctors are calling their lawyers to confirm what coverage and what care is needed. And so when you have an instance where someone may have that fetal twin syndrome and they need to have the abortion on the other baby so the other twin will survive, that care is being prolonged or not done at all, and then there would end up being a risk to the mother itself. All I can think at this point, because our restrictions with our doctors having to call lawyers, it's basically bringing it almost to a total ban. And I just keep putting myself in my family's shoes and imagine if something happened to one of my nieces and they were forced to have to go through something that they shouldn't have to go through. And nobody should have to do that.
Thank you. Next question. There is some discussion on changing election laws in South Dakota, in particular regarding early voting. Do you have a position regarding South Dakota current election laws? And it looks like Melissa will start with you this time.
I don't have a lot of goals as far as changing our current legislation around early voting. I believe it really is a long period of time for early voting, but that does allow people more access and the ability to get their vote in. And so I don't have a whole lot of concerns around that. I don't know if the question is alluding to if there's any election fraud happening. I have not seen that at our local level. So I'm not 100% sure what the question is asking, but I don't have any top priorities to go after election law right now.
Cole?
I think South Dakota has a very solid election system, and if you can't find an ID, you can find someone to notarize you and prove who you are. You can still get registered to vote. My main concern right now is with who is in charge of our elections and who could be in charge of our elections. With experiences myself and having to deal with the elections office in this state, there were a lot of blatant issues that seem borderline intentional. So I'm really concerned in making sure that our elections department with the Secretary of State can be transparent and clear and honest with people, so that election processes can be transparent and we can get people on the ballot the way they're supposed to when they're actually following the rules, instead of being told to follow the rules and being denied access to the ballot. So my concern is more with the institution than the process.
I have 100% trust in the voting system that we presently have. I saw on TV the other day where they're even opening up where you can go vote, sample vote. They'll show you how it runs through their machines. I'm not one that's suspicious about how our vote is counted. I will agree with Cole, however, is we need to be cautious about the people that we put in the place that determines and oversees, the voting regulations and the process itself.
Okay, thank you. Before our next question, again, just a reminder that we do have forms in the back if you'd like to submit a question. I think we're running a little thin up here, so if anybody has any questions, don't be afraid to ask them there. Next question. Should Medicaid expansion be approved by the voters? Will you do anything to impede its implementation? And what is your position on Medicaid expansion? I believe this time we are starting with you, Cole.
I absolutely support Medicaid expansion. I don't know who wouldn't. It was meant to be paired with the Affordable Care Act initially when that came out, so that gap between those on Medicaid right now and those who can qualify for the Affordable Care Act can still get coverage. And there's that initial 2-year period where the federal government supplies the funds for 95% of the expenses, and the state only has to cover 5%. And I believe back in the month of July, the state only paid out a couple $1,000s. So if we can find ways to, look into the surplus in our budget and to how we can fund that and create a specific fund for it, so it's permanent and it doesn't get lost in the general fund, that would be great. And I do believe that if we can find ways to upgrade jets and mansions in the state, we can find a way to pay for this.
Quickly, what the expansion really means is it expands the number of people by 42,500 people will come eligible for it. The first 2 years, and I think Cole talked a little bit about this, first 2 years, it's a state match of 5% to 95% to the federal. After the first 2 years, it goes to 90-10. A total cost, I believe, the first couple of years of $5 million each year, and then after that it increases. I think it's a wonderful thing for the people that don't have insurance. And we were all on a conference call, and the best kind of insurance there is the personal insurance. Second kind is Medicaid care, and then it's Medicare, and then the worst kind of insurance is where you don't have anything at all. These people are struggling. We're raising the salary that they can earn from $12,000 to $18,000. And I wonder how many people in this room could live on $12,000 and afford insurance. So it's a good deal for the people that need to have the insurance.
Generally speaking, I am not in support of enlarging the government footprint or extending programming. I do acknowledge it's become a better deal in terms of South Dakota, the cost South Dakota accepts versus the gain received by about estimating around 45,000 South Dakotans. And early polling seems to indicate that the amendment has a fair chance of passing. Already kind of talked about the specifics along with the expansion. I continue to have concerns around the long-term sustainability of the program, as well as I've already been hearing some representatives talk about the negative impact in the budget to education that it could result in. So I look forward to hearing the voice of the people on November 8th And ultimately, the people get to decide, which is where the power belongs anyway.
Next question. $200 million was set aside for workforce housing from last legislative session. Since then, $150 million was returned because of constraints to access this. Do you have a solution? And this one we will start with Roger.
Yeah, you're going to have to repeat that again. There's 200. I'm not familiar with this at all, so I'm going to have to write some of this stuff down.
Yep, so as it reads on the question, $200 million was set aside for workforce housing from last legislative session. Since then, $150 million was returned because of restraints to access this. Do you have a solution?
So are you saying that this money, this $200 million, came from the federal government and then we returned it, $150 million of it? Speak up, Opie. I can't hear you.
It's been difficult to get a hold of this money because of the constraints that are all on it. In order for it to get passed, the workforce housing, everybody had their hand in it so that it got voted through. Am I correct, John? Since then, the money has been hard to access. And about all we can use it for is for water and sewers. We can't build a street with it. It's been difficult. I don't think that was the intention for that money. It was to help state developers create a workforce housing project that would be affordable for workforce level and maybe even low income families. That's my
Thanks, Ope. It's still a real difficult question for me to answer. I'm guessing what I would say is that the key players need to get together, and if it is federal money, why are there so many restrictions on it? Who put the restriction on it? Did the state put the restrictions on it, or did the federal government do that? Certainly, if we had access to $200 million for developing homes in our cities and in the state, we should not be returning $150 million of it because there's so many strings attached to it and it's difficult to get at.
My understanding of this issue is out of the 200 million, 50 million of the federal dollars were released and able to be accessed, and 150 million got caught up on just rules of how to apply through the South Dakota Housing. I believe that this will come back to the legislature this year, and I imagine we will also want to figure out how to distribute this and get this into the hands of the communities as quickly as we can.
I tie this back to listening to the people. Our government, our state government, has a habit of declining or returning a lot of money that could benefit us in many different ways. And in regards to this process, I know there's a lot of steps involving paperwork, lots of red tape, and even if you seem to be following things by the dot, there always seems to be a problem. So it's not necessarily that people aren't qualifying for those funds or we're not qualified to use those funds. It's that the state makes it a game to get because they don't want to give it to us. And they just want to take it back and send it where it needs to go. I don't know why we're so afraid to take money that we pay into our tax system. So if we really want to improve our communities and our housing for workforce, we need to make it as easy as possible to get that done, especially if it's the cities that are working to get that handed out.
Okay, next question. How do you see the state being better partner to all businesses, large and small? Melissa, we'll start with you.
So I wonder if this question is related to the pandemic and how many small businesses we had lost throughout that time. And I could be wrong, so my apologies if I'm off base. But we did see that a lot of the big boxes were able to stay open, while a lot of our strong entrepreneurs had to close their doors. And I believe that there has been already some government support of small businesses. Brookings has always been invested in entrepreneurs, and it's always been a pretty critical part of our community. So I would look to better understand this issue and continue to talk to current legislators and understand what has been done and review the bills that will be coming in front of the legislature for this session.
So I could speak a little to this, and And I don't think it's necessarily so much to do with the business climate. We have a very strong business climate. I know a lot of business owners, and I have family members. My father is a business owner who does great work. And a lot of the things I hear is in regards to the taxing process and when dealing with the state offices and how you pay your taxes. There's some business owners that end up paying taxes twice, especially if they are a form of, they don't work directly for the company, but they kind of work for themselves, where there's the sales tax that's taken out, and then the state government asks them to pay for taxes as well. And it's been openly acknowledged that happens in some cases, not all cases, but you have to really dig hard to find those answers. And we need to make the taxing process more transparent and easier for businesses in the state so we can help them grow.
The way I understand the question is, how can the state help small businesses, large businesses, and middle-sized businesses? It appears to me, since COVID, every business has had a problem finding workers. And so I think what really the state needs to do, they need to help develop partnerships with businesses and the folks that are actually maybe retraining some of the folks that are looking for work. To me, I've talked to many people in town here that run businesses, and that seems to be their number one issue. We need to have workers come in the door. We hire somebody on Friday, they don't show up on Monday. I talked to President Dunn. He says that they can't get workforce, even at the university, to take care of their food service and to clean their buildings because people just don't want. I don't know. People don't want to work. The salary is not high enough. But I think the state needs to really work with small businesses and work with trying to get folks back in the workforce.
Next question. Do you favor better transparency from the governor's office and state ethics board regarding ethics concerns? Cole, looks like we're starting with you this time.
100%. We have a governor right now that's talking about being one of the most transparent governments in the state, in the most free state in the nation. But what we see every day, every week this year, it seems to be another ethics concern that the governor is openly trying to keep secret. And if it has to do with our taxpayer dollars, we deserve to know the answers to that. And we deserve to have a governor who's honest with us and isn't using us for our tax dollars and as a platform. So really, I'm not seeing any transparency and honesty right now. What I do know would fix that is electing Jamie Smith as governor. I've met him myself. He is very open and honest about everything. And we're not getting what we deserve as constituents from Kristi Noem. I've reached out to her multiple times on different subjects through multiple platforms in the past 3 years, and I have never once gotten a response from her.
My answer is going to be real short. Yes, there should be transparency in the state budget from the smallest of items to the use of the governor's airplane and what it's being used for and how many miles it's flying and etc. But no, I think we need transparency. I sat on the school board, most sat on the school board. We always dealt with transparency. If otherwise, people start becoming very suspicious of us in a hurry, and I think that's happened in this state, and I think that needs to be reversed.
I agree that transparency is a key component of any leadership role. And Roger is correct. We worked really hard on the school board when we were working through some communication items as well. What I will share from a school board perspective is, even though we tried to use every medium we could think of, from radio to YouTube to emails and written form, we still had people that were asking us why we weren't communicating. And we felt we were kind of over-communicating. So it's a difficult thing sometimes to communicate in the right way through the right channels. But as far as the highest level of leadership for our state, of course, transparency is critical, and South Dakotans deserve to know.
Okay. If elected, what can the state's role be in our child care crisis, especially for children ages 0 to 3? Roger, we'll start with you on this one.
Say it one more time. Speak into the mic, please.
If elected, what can the state's role be in our child care crisis, especially for children ages 0 through 3?
It's a real good question, and I probably don't have a real good answer. I'm sorry. sometimes I think we get involved in too many things. The state gets involved in too many things. But if there is a crisis in that 0 to 3, the state at least should start the discussion of what level that of help that might be out there for these parents that have these children children in this age. But once again, I really don't have a lot of knowledge on that topic, so I'm not going to go on and say something that I'll regret later.
Yeah, the lack of child care in Brookings has been around since I have been here. I remember with our first child, I think we had a 9-month wait before we were able to get into a daycare provider. And it definitely contributes to the workforce shortages that we're seeing as well. And so it's definitely an issue that is making some of our other challenges even worse. Like with workforce shortages, there's already some creative things happening around incentives for keeping students within the state, trying to incentivize that South Dakota is a great place to work and a great state, and perhaps working toward helping them to pay off some of their college loans if they stay within the state or stay within a local organization for a while. So there are some programs around those lines. As far as childcare, that's an item that I would need to do additional research to better understand what the state should be involved in and how they could help.
I think a really great idea would be to incentivize workplace childcare, whether it be through some form of tax credit or other incentive. Not only would that assist with building the workforce, it would also assist with the child care shortage and the expense of that child care. But we might not be able to get every employer to offer some sort of workplace child care, but if you can get one place in town, one reliable facility that's been around forever, we've got 3M and Daktronics. If you can get one of those places to get incentivized on that, and see if they can even get involved in child care with other employers and manufacturers and businesses in their community. So I think if we can find a way to incentivize that, that would make a huge, huge difference with keeping people in the workplace and the shortage itself, the expense.
Okay. Due to time, this will be our last question before your closing remarks. This last question, Melissa, we'll start with you. The question is asking what your top 3 priorities are if you're elected. More specifically, there's often talk about legislative priorities, especially at the beginning of session. If you could decide the first 3 topics the House addressed, what would they be? And again, Melissa, we'll start with you.
Top 3. I think I have 7 on my list. Top items of focus would have to be mental health across the state. Specifically, less effort, I think, has been focused toward our youth, and we've seen that to be a significant issue over the last couple of years with some alarming rates. Workforce shortages. And I'm also invested in the outcome of the summer studies around the juvenile justice process and what will come out of that study and what we can do to move forward to help schools and communities there.
One of the first 3, I'll just go in order with how I have them written down, would be in regards to either getting Roe on the ballot or even before Roe is on the ballot, having the legislature get together and get some better guidelines with the abortion ban that we have in the state, because that in itself is an emergency that can cost human life of mother if healthcare is prolonged. I also believe we have a lot of work to do in regards to our relationship with the LGBTQ community, and we need to get every single legislature together to talk about these issues, whether they agree or not. And so we can discuss how we can move forward with being cordial with each other, because when our legislators speak, our children are listening, and what our children hear affects them. And I also have a big interest in bringing the not only juvenile diversion programs, but the diversion programs through the courthouse that Dan Nelson has been involved in to a state level.
My number 1 priority would be very simply education And I include in that mental health because these kids came back different than they left after COVID. And I'll address that more in my closing comments. We have a tremendous budget reserve. When I was superintendent, I think we had a budget reserve of somewhere around 120 million. Now I believe we're south of 400 million in budget reserve, and we need to deal with that. We need to deal with that with not ongoing expenses, so it's going to be a hard thing to do, whether we set aside part of that for if the Medicaid expansion happens, or we have some projects up on campus that need to be completed that are way over budget, and those are one-time expenses. Maybe we can do that. So the budget reserve is going to take up, I think, a lot of discussion time at the state level. And then, of course, that work shortage in work development, that's huge. We're going to have to do something to put people in the workplace.
Okay, as we mentioned a second ago, we will move to closing remarks. Again, each candidate will have 2 minutes here for closing remarks. Again, we'll work down the line here, starting with you, Cole.
Thank you. So, really looking to be a voice of diversity and reason in Pierre. I've had the chance to be a part of the Brookings Pride, do work with the Humane Society. I'm on the council and the United Church of Christ in town and their justice programs that they have. And I've also been involved in Clear Partners, which is a community law enforcement action response partners, a civilian group that works with local law enforcement. So I've had the chance to understand the different needs of people in this community and in this state. And I really want to ensure that no matter what party anybody is from, that we represent the people and that we finally start listening to what people want and even just following their vote, because there's not a lot of listening going on right now. And I think that's one big thing that I have to offer here. And I really want to do my best to represent the will of the people and not my own agenda, because it's not about me. I'm running because I care deeply about this community. I love Brookings. It's the only reason I still live in this state. And I feel like everybody should love their community just as much as I love Brookings. So I want to make this a safe state for everybody to live and grow and excel and exceed.
First of all, I'd like to thank everybody that came out on a Saturday morning. It's going to be a gorgeous day. I want to discuss something that we're probably tired of hearing about, and that's COVID. And I visited with the school administrators here in Brookings, and they agree with me. We have a generation lost. We have kids that missed 1.5 to 2 years of school, and the schools did the best they could. This is not a state problem. This is a national problem. If you look at the test scores, reading scores are down 5%. Math scores are down 7%. First time ever they've decreased instead of increased. We have a problem. I do some student-teacher observations for SDSU and DSU, and I'm in these schools, and these kids have come back different. And we've talked about this mental health issue. It's just not about the kids. It's about the family makeup that's different. So we have a generation, I think if we talked to President Dunn, we'd find out those kids that came in the last couple of years to college are missing something. So at a state level, I think we need to take an in-depth look at what we can do, and it's not a short-term thing, and it's going to cost some money, but what we can do to bring these kids back around and get them on target and get their test scores back where they need to be. I'll close with, once again, thanking all you folks for coming here. I hope you go out and vote early. If you don't vote early, please vote on November 8th. And as my T-shirt said in the 4th of July parade, give a hoot, vote DeGroot. Thank you.
Thank you again for this time to talk through the issues that are important to South Dakota. I love this community and the people in it. The last 14 years have shown that I am a leader who will sincerely listen, who will put in the work and represent you well in Pierre. And the weight of this position is not lost on me. I approach it with a lot of respect and humility and intentionality. Who we select to represent us in Pierre matters. It's a great responsibility, and I'm raising my hand for that responsibility now. I have demonstrated thoughtful leadership regarding responsible spending of funds, I've sincerely sought to understand the perspective of others through a very tumultuous time, and I have offered a composed and steady response to both conflict and opportunities equally. My unique set of experiences in public service and leadership have allowed me to be a great advocate for our communities, and it has been a great honor for me to represent the staff, students, and families of the Brookings School District. I've often called myself a policy geek because I do love to read policy and dig in and make improvements. Not everybody does. I know it's not very cool, but policy is important and it's impactful and it lasts for years and years to come. And I'm proud of the work that we did on the Brookings School Board in creating a system where those policies are reviewed every 3 years to ensure that they comply with the state regulations. I appreciate the trust that's been placed in me by the community over these years, and I now stand ready to represent our communities in Pierre. I would humbly ask for your vote on November 8th. Thank you.
Well, again, thank you to all of the candidates for joining us today. Thank you, everybody here that attended as well. Again, I know some of the questions that were asked today are a little tough to answer in 60 seconds or less, but I'm sure all of our candidates would be happy to maybe expand on some of their answers with you folks that are in the audience here today. So, again, thank you to our sponsors, Cool Beans Coffee and the Brookings Economic Development Corporation. And with that, we will wrap up today. Thank you, everybody.